Hello. Today I will discuss the topic of mathematical induction. Now, my utmost question before carrying out the research was trying to figure out a definition for mathematical induction. And the reason why I wanted to find a definition for mathematical induction was because I was so confused on how to do it. So I figured that the best way to be able to perform mathematical induction is to first define mathematical induction. So the definition or brief definition of mathematical induction is that mathematical induction is a procedure. It is a configuration of absolute proof, and that mathematical induction is the guideline from which one can conclude that the statement holds true for any number. Now, once I had figured out what the definition for mathematical induction was, then I had to figure out the best way of showing mathematical induction. And as most mathematicians know, there are two forms of mathematical induction. We have the basis step, which is known as the weak form. And the weak form demonstrates proof that the statement holds true for the first natural number, which is normally denoted as n equals 0 or n equals 1. And the inductive step, that's the second form, is known as the inductive step, which is also known as the strong form of mathematical induction. Now, the strong form states that the statement is true for some natural number, which is denoted as n. Now, if the statement holds true for n plus 1, if it holds true for n, which is what we did in the first step, the basis step, then it should hold for any other step, which is n plus 1. Now, in my paper that I will send later on through email, I had did a brief equation on the weak form of mathematical induction. Now, after I did the equation on the brief form of mathematical induction, I still had more questions that I needed to answer. And those questions consisted of: what is the history of mathematical induction? What is the evolution of mathematical induction? And what is the pedagogy of mathematical induction, or how is mathematical induction taught? Now, to start off with the history of mathematical induction, the earliest evidence of mathematical induction was found in Euclid's proof of the number of primes in infinite that the number of primes is infinite in Bhaskara's recurring method. Now, also a very unique form of mathematical induction that counts down rather than up is discovered as a paradox, where the paradox presents the argument that if 1,000,000 grains of sand formed a pile and by simply removing one particle of sand from the pile left, is it a pile? Then a simple grain of sand, or this is the conclusion they came to, that a simple grain of sand or even no particles form a pile. Now, also in history, an implicit proof by mathematical induction for arithmetic sequences was introduced in 1000 AD by Abu Bakr ibn Muhammad ibn al-Hussein al-Kharif, who utilized it to validate the binomial theorem and the attributes of Pascal's triangle. And we see Pascal's triangle and the binomial theorem is used a lot in mathematics today. Now, none of the ancient mathematicians explicitly stated that the inductive hypothesis. Now, Francesco Morellico's book Arithmeticorum Libri Duum, that was published in 1575, employed mathematical induction by utilizing the inductive hypothesis to put forth the argument that the sum of the first n odd integers is n2. The first explicit form of the principle of induction was presented by Pascal in his Trait du triangle arithmétique, which was circulated in 1665. And if you ever had any math courses, try out this triangle that he came up with is in form of a triangle, and you'll see that on the outside is zeros, but each number adds up to the number below, or the set of numbers below will add up to the number above it. Now, this inductive hypothesis was also employed by Jacob Bernoulli, which is one of the mathematicians from the Bernoulli family. And from this instance, mathematical induction had continuously been utilized and instructed. The contemporary and methodological utilization of the principle appeared in the 19th century with George Boole, who's also famous for Boolean algebra. Also, Augustus de Morgan, and he's famous for the De Morgan theorem. We have Charles Sanders Peirce, Giuseppe Pino, and Richard Dedekind. They were also mathematicians that contributed greatly in the 19th century to mathematical induction. Now, that takes care of the history and the evolution of mathematical induction. Now, I would like to discuss the pedagogy of mathematical induction. Now, with mathematical induction, many students experience significant difficulties when learning and then attempting to construct and communicate proofs of statements that using the principle of mathematical induction. Research on the pedagogy of mathematical induction has gained considerable amount of attention since the 1970s, and that was done by Avital and Lieberstein in 1978. Also, Bloomfield did it in 1974. And later on in the 80s, Dubinsky did it in 1986 and 1987, where he wrote about the pedagogy of mathematical induction. Since then, there has been an intensifying interest in the domain of the study in the past decade, and that goes into the 2000s, where you have 2001 and 2004, where Ron and Dreyfus and Harold also did study on the pedagogy of mathematical induction. Now, in order to facilitate the pedagogical research on the principle of mathematical induction and its position in the mathematics and computer science curriculum, Avital and Liebstein in 1978 structured the difficulties with induction into three categories. And the three categories were the technical, mathematical, and conceptual categories. Now, with the technical category, in the technical category, they had technical difficulties with mathematics that involved pupils who were not capable of using deductive reasoning through the stages that was essential to developing the proof. In analysis of both high school and undergraduate university students, Baker in 1996 claimed that an insufficient formal mathematics background was the key, and a lack of mathematical content knowledge were the elemental factors that impacted pointedly to the pupil's inability to construct a proof by mathematical induction. So, in contrast to technical difficulties, the difficulties with mathematical induction are not accredited to the student's incapability to work with mathematical expression, but students who make mistakes generally are generally capable mathematically. Nonetheless, they have made miscalculations in mathematical portion of the principal mathematical induction. Ordinarily, mathematical complications manifest in one of two steps in the mathematical induction. Now, in the second section of mathematical complexities and mathematical induction contains the inductive step. When attempting to prove that a given statement holds true for the subset of natural numbers, students sometimes do not distinguish that the induction step is not to prove that k plus 1 is true. This commonplace error adds to the mathematical difficulties for the principle of mathematical induction. Now, conceptual complications with mathematical induction comprised of a scope of factors. First, the region of 70% of students do not fully comprehend the disparity between deductive and inductive reasoning, and Williams found that out in 1979 when he did his research, which is manifested by a general lack of understanding that prevents students from recognizing mathematical induction as an effective form of proof, and Ernest found that out in 1984. For many math students, induction means take an equation containing a natural number and adding something to both sides of the question to construct a related equation with n plus 1 to the nth degree. Consequently, math induction turns out to be a mechanical procedure triggered by the statement. So, therefore, students perceive mathematical induction as a technique of drawing general conclusions from a number of individual cases, thus indicating no more than an aptitude to outline patterns and not a prodigious comprehension of the fundamental associations involved. And Harold did that research, proclaimed that in his research in 2001. Now, another conceptual difficulty with mathematical induction is that many students have the misunderstanding that the basis step is not really essential. So students are not informed nor are they exposed to the instances in which the deduction step can be validated when the basis does not hold true. Another routine error when writing proof by mathematical induction is the establishment of the hypothesis of the inductive step. Correspondingly, the problem of induction may be formulated as the problem as how to make inferences from observed to unobserved cases, especially to future cases, and Vedder did that in 1969. Baker also did that research in 1996. and it had already been reported that conceptual perception of mathematical induction has been an issue neglected by previous research. Though there have been many endeavors to determine the pedagogical difficulties of inductive proof by mathematical induction, most of the published research has only confirmed basic observations. Students who do not possess a strong technical mathematical education are likely to develop problems with mathematical induction for the reason that they will characteristically formulate technical and mathematical miscalculations that influence their inability to form valid proofs by mathematical induction. Now, to show that mathematical induction is employed in various fields other than mathematics, I picked a field, and that field was the field of medicine. Believe it or not, mathematical induction is used in the field of medicine. It is used, as you can see, simply by using the decision-making trees or trees. Now, the avenue of finding correct decision is as many as the number of people who have to make them. Nonetheless, the principal idea for many of the decisions is a decision mainly based on a vast array of occurrences from solving cases that are similar. And this can be assumed in decisions that will become more dependable. But for mathematical professionals who have made choices, it is actually becoming increasingly who have to make choices. It has become increasingly complicated because the medical professionals are unable to handle the large quantities of data. At this juncture, the need for reliable decision technique occurs, and the technique should be capable of processing vast quantities of data and to help medical experts render their decisions with ease and trustworthiness. So for this purpose, it is imperative that the same degree of suggesting the possible assessment to offer an explanation of how and why the recommended decision was chosen. In this manner, a medical professional can decide whether the solution is viable or not. Mathematical induction plays an exceedingly important role in the professional field of medicine. Notably, the medical diagnostic methods. Now, decision validation techniques applied in helping physicians are an integral part in the medical decision-making process, particularly in those areas where a decision must be attained efficiently and unfailingly. Since theoretical decision-making models with the prospect of automated learning should be considered for completing such tasks, the decision trees are very helpful in the decision-making process. And of course, we use decision trees or trees when we're doing mathematical induction. Now, decision trees have been very effectively used for many medical decisions. Decision trees are considered to be a highly trustworthy decision-making procedure that can provide accuracy with a simple demonstration of collected knowledge for the medical professional. When using decision trees, the process can be easily substantiated by an authority or an authoritative figure. For these reasons, decision trees are suitable to assist the process of making a decision in medicine. And on my paper that I will turn in, I had drew a simple decision tree using some medical terminology on how a medical professional would use this tree to make a decision. So, in conclusion, what I wanted to the intent of this paper was to clarify that mathematical induction is with a brief was to clarify mathematical induction with a brief definition and also discussing the two forms of induction. I also wanted to touch upon the history, evolution, and pedagogy of mathematical induction, as well as giving a sample of mathematical induction, which is once again in the research paper that I will submit. Finally, I wanted to provide a profession in which mathematical induction is often applied other than in the obvious field of mathematics. If there are no questions, this will conclude my discussion on mathematical induction.